today to CPW on a very exciting but also very busy weekend. So we know that you had to decide not to do something else during 3 to 5. If you haven't been here before or know me, I'm Sarah Danziger. I'm the Education Program Manager. And you're here joining us today for the special conversation, Queer Bodies, Queer Community, Photography and Belonging in Upstate New York. This conversation marks the Upstate Photography Biennial, curated by CPW's curators Marina Chow and Adam Ryan, as well as the Gestures of Care, Resilience, and Connection, which is in the Community Gallery, curated by Sherry Diamond. We are grateful to have 4 exceptional panelists here to speak on photography as a well-established way for queer communities to recognize one another, build connections, imagine futures, and preserve histories that might otherwise be overlooked. Our panelists are photographers Luis Manuel Diaz, Morgan Gwenwald, Meryl Meisler, Kate Warren, and we are thrilled to welcome Anna Conlan, Director of the Samuel Dorsky Museum of Art, to moderate this conversation. Hi, everyone. Do you mind settling down? Thank you. Please, can we give a warm welcome to everyone here today? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's wonderful to see such a great audience with us. As Sarah said, my name is Anna Conlan. I'm the director of the Samuel Dorsky Museum of Art, which is a museum on the SUNY New Paltz campus. We have a collection of almost 10,000 art objects, and one of our biggest strengths is photography. So I was really honored to be invited here by Brian and Sarah at this special moment in CPW with their first Upstate Photography Biennial. So congratulations to Marina and Adam for a wonderful exhibition. And it's so wonderful to see it also on view with the works from the Women's Photography Collective, curated by Sherry Diamond in the Community Gallery as well. I love that we can see both those exhibitions at the same time, and they are represented both on this panel today as well. So happy Upstate Art Weekend and happy Pride, everyone. It's Pride. And so grateful to CPW for, and also I think some nudging from Morgan to really pay attention to the fact that within these exhibitions, there are some themes of community, of gender, of sexuality, of queer culture, that it was really worth, drawing those themes out and getting some of the artists that touch on that in their work together to talk about it. So thanks so much for the 4 of you for coming together in such a quick way, but I think it's meaningful too. So what's exciting, I think, about today's panel is that although all of these artists work actually quite differently in their practices, they all think about relationships. They all explore place and belonging in different ways. They document nightlife. They work through performance or narrative and landscape. We've got cross-generational, international perspectives, but in some way or another, all of them explores what it means to belong to a place, to a community, to a family, to each other. So we're going to mainly be hearing from the artists themselves. I'll ask a few guiding questions and prompts, and then we want to leave time to hear from you all. So if you have questions or thoughts, please save them, because we'll do a Q&A at the end. So I also wanted to come clean right now from the beginning that I bring with me today a deep curiosity about queer art in the Hudson Valley. I'm about to begin an exhibition project about queer art histories in the Hudson Valley, beginning whenever we can begin and ending today. And I think a lot of that process is going to be just listening to artists and people in our community. So I'm particularly curious about your relationship to here, to our home, but also, if anyone in the audience has thoughts about queer art in the Hudson Valley more broadly, I'd love to hear from you. This is kind of crowdsourcing curating in action. So on to today, though. We decided that rather one of us reading their incredibly impressive bios, it would probably be more interesting if we heard from the artists themselves about their practice, about their background, what brought them to photography. So I'm going to hand over the mic first to Meryl, and we've got some images on the screen behind that I can scroll through. And so I just invite you to tell us about yourself, what brought you to photography, maybe talk about the works that are included in the shows right here. Okay.
Would you be in charge of doing that? Okay. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. So the basics, born in the Bronx, raised in North Massapequa, Long Island, since we are probably Plainedge High School. Okay, Buffalo State College and University of Wisconsin at Madison. Okay, that's the quickie. I live in New York City and in Woodstock, New York. Yes, New York City is my primary residence, okay? And I live here with my life partner, Patricia O'Brien. What brought me to photography? My father, printer by trade, always taking photographs of our family occasions. My father's father, I only saw him with a light meter in my face. This is what they did, their passion, okay? At age 7, I got an adventure called the Adventure Camera for my birthday. I took pictures of friends, family, school trips, Girl Scouts, the things I still do. But then in 1972, fall 72, I went to the Dion Arbus retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art. I don't think I went specifically to see that show, but I saw it and I felt it. And I was moved by it. And the next year I was going on for my master's in art education. And I decided to take a photography class and learn how to use a real camera. That was 1973. Never stopped. My major influences, besides my parents, my dad, I'd say seeing the work of Jacques-Henri Lartigue's family photographs. My nightlife work, totally Versailles. Okay, Arbus. These are my major influences. I guess I don't know how long to talk. In 1975, shortly after coming out lesbian, I moved to New York City and I wanted to study with Lizette Modell, Arbus's living, working, thriving mentor, and I did. And once I moved into New York City, even though I grew up in Long Island, I was scared of the city, I knew that's where I belonged. And been happily ever since. Many bodies of work have to do with my life. You know, family, friends, teaching, trips. But the work on exhibit is about nightlife. As a young person in the 70s, I was going out. And I was there at the disco scene as a participant who often carried her camera. Boy, am I glad I did. And the work on this exhibit now is that I've gone back to the nightlife scene. Hey, I'm alive and kicking. This is really exciting. And I know I have a perspective that very few people have. And I've chosen to go back. And it's a long story because I know people in the nightlife through Bushwick, through many things. I've chosen to go back and using the same type, medium format, analog camera, the same film, the same flash, because I do want to capture what's the same and what's changed. And the challenge to me as a photographer, how do you make an exciting photograph when you've been there, done that. And I also, a note, you may not know that it was CPW when they were on Tinker Street that got me back into working in the darkroom. So, and on a very grateful note, this is the first exhibit. Okay, since I spent 31 years, I was a New York City public school art teacher. I always made my own work, but nobody really knew too much about who I am. You know, like our careers, they go up and down. But when I retired, I had time. This is the first show since 2009 when I started unveiling that I have this huge body of unseen work. The first time that a curator has chosen only new work. And so thank you, Adam. Thank you, Marina. It's a big deal to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So these are people in the contemporary nightlife scene.
And we'll get into a bit of this as well. Okay, let's see who's next. Okay, Kate, you're at me.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Warren. I am a photographer and interdisciplinary artist based here in the Hudson Valley. I live across the river on a 1,500-acre working grain farm that I run as a LGBTQ co-housing and artist residency project. I do that in part because of how I came up. I'm from Vermont originally. I was raised in a small town. Thank you. I was raised in a small town where everybody knew each other. And so you had to act right and take care of your neighbors. And then I moved to Washington, D.C. after getting a business degree and was a big part of the DIY art scene during the Obama administration. I was part of a cohort of millennial people working in media and creative fields who were really interested in reactivating parts of the city that had been under-resourced for many years. And so I really understood how important access to space was, because I spent a decade in DC with a group of people who had access to all these different kinds of places that artists took over and gathered and made meaning and made community. I lived in the Hudson Valley for undergrad. I lived in Poughkeepsie 15 years ago. It's a very different time. And so when it came time for me to move out of living in cities, I lived in DC and Los Angeles for over 10 years. I knew that I wanted to come back to the Hudson Valley for a number of reasons. One, because of its proximity to a vibrant cultural sort of zeitgeist. Two, because of the vibrant queer community. I had been coming here every year since I had left, and so I knew the gays were outside. And I knew that there were people who already were doing an incredible amount of community building. And so that was something that was very attractive to me and something that I really wanted to be a part of. When I was in DC, I came up covering balls and galas for the Washington Post. That was my first beat. So like Meryl, I was in the outfit at the function with the flash and the camera. And I discovered really quickly that if you dress like a party guest, you're treated like a party guest. And if you dress like the help, you're treated like the help. And so I covered for many, many years these sort of nexuses of power that sort of lived at the intersection of politics and a scene, right? Where lots of different people were coming together in space to be social, raise energy together, be a part of something. And so that was very intrinsic to the foundation of my work and how I came up starting to make work. And so after I went and got my MFA at Syracuse University, where I then taught for a period of time, I started making these performative pictures. I'd always been a dancer, and I am really interested in the ways that we, especially as queer people, can self-represent. And so I started making this body of work using my own body and the bodies of the people in my intimate circles, in my community, to really trouble gender, to trouble norms. I was raised in quite a conservative, traditional family, and spent many years unlearning a lot of the things that we default to. And so photography became a way to see myself and to see the people around me in community through this very sort of collective image making process. And so the work that is up in the exhibition, in the CARE show, and that's being displayed behind me is a part of that larger body of work that really asks questions around how and why we show up as who we are visually, and what becomes possible when we are able to unlearn showing up in more expected ways. And photography, really allowed me to embrace the theatricality of the lens and the gaze, and that component was incredibly liberating.
Yeah, great, thanks, Kate.
Thanks.
I'm gonna scroll quickly this way, so cover your eyes because we're gonna go fast here to get to Lewis's work right at the beginning. Sorry, guys. All right, Luis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luis Manuel Diaz. Thank you all for being here. Just a quick little backstory. I grew up in rural Michoacan, Mexico. I immigrated with my family when I was 8 years old. I think I came across photography by chance when I was in middle school. And one of the first assignments was actually creating a pinhole camera, which later on ended up being really important to me. But at the time, I think I gravitated towards photography because there was an immediacy, there was an urgency to how you're able to represent kind of concerns surrounding being a human and existing. I think for me, I initially started making images solely with my family. I didn't include any of the pictures from the biennial in this. This is work outside of what I have. The images that are in the biennial, you can find them there by the elevator. There are these colorful images of my family. And that work, well, for over a decade, I made these images of my family. And it spoke about living across borders, what does this post-migration sensorium mean and signify? What does living in the States mean? What does living in Mexico also mean? So for 10 years, I was doing that. And I think that really taught me a lot of things about myself and a lot about what I wanted out of photography. A few years back, I was asked a really important question. Where are you in the work? And I think that just really transformed how I viewed images and how I viewed myself occupying the images. I think I always saw myself in relationship to my family and a larger history, a communal history. So I decided to kind of take a step back and think about who I am as a queer brown immigrant outside of just a family unit. I really, I initially started gravitating towards construction sites using an 8x10 view camera. I was really interested in the tension of kind of the tension of using an 8x10 camera to occupy labor. My father was a construction worker, so from a very young age, I used to go with him to visit these sites. These sites not only spoke of these larger complicated histories surrounding immigrant labor and kind of who is responsible for sustaining America's vision of progress. But I think also these construction sites kind of became very erotic for me and kind of really transformative and kind of ended up creating this very important and kind of specific idea surrounding desire and bodies. So for me, I revisited these sites and started making these images. And for me, making these, again, they're like made with the view camera and like the challenges and kind of the relationship that they has with like the history of photography and that camera. But I also wanted to make a different type of image where the construction sites gave all the information. I wanted something that kind of was less specific. The linger in darkness, that spoke of a psychology. So me and my partner, we created a camera obscura, and our thought process was thinking about how do you document your thoughts, your imagination. So if thinking of my entire body of work, my family work as a home, my family occupies the living room, the kitchen, the dining room. I'm thinking about where does this work sit? And it's in the attic, in the mind. How does what we come across on the everyday rituals and sites, how does that then linger in our mind and end up creating this disorienting, confusing psyche that later on ends up informing our own desires and sense of self? So with this work, I'm really interested in what's described and what lacks description, darkness becoming a contemplative space for reflection. I'm interested in material translation, how a tarp can turn into a sheet, can turn into skin. I'm really interested in how you're able to go in and out of a psychological space.
Great, thanks,
Yeah.
Luis.
Is this, yes, there we go.
There we go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Would you folks in the back like to find a seat and get comfy? Grab some chocolate if you like and join us. We've got plenty of seats here. My name's Morgan Gwenwald, and I am so delighted to be here with my colleagues and friends. I've been in the Hudson Valley for 20 years now, but I still feel like a New Yorker. Though I started out in Madison, Wisconsin, Miami, Florida, and then Tallahassee, where I went to high school and started really doing some photography. Actually, when I was in high school, I got to take a couple courses on the FSU campus. I was allowed to because we didn't have anything like photo classes at Leon High. It was not a good time in Florida. You think it's bad now? It was really bad then. Especially for a Yankee girl. But that's kind of where I entered into photography. And from very early on in the early 70s, I was involved in finding the women's community in Tallahassee, early feminist work. We had a bookstore, we had a women's center on campus, we did conferences, we had an ERA parade, just all of those things that were happening in the 70s. And I was documenting it because I thought it was important, and it was my world, and it was my people. And that, as time went on, became more and more focused on the lesbian content of it, because I have always been a lesbian and was surrounded by lesbians in the houses we lived in Tallahassee. It was group living and stuff. So I've just always been capturing that. And I was enrolled in the BFA program at FSU, and I did a graduation show in 1974. Before some of you were even born. But the 70s, the early 70s were a very interesting and rough time, much as young people now looking at our political culture and our culture and how people are being treated. We were exposed to the same kind of horrors in the world. The Vietnam War, civil rights movement was happening, racism was all over the place. It was, and I was a political person. I was a feminist, and we studied things and talked about things and wrote about things, and I photographed things. And I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do for my graduation show. I did a focus on the women's community, documentary work in Tallahassee at that time. And then I thought, well, there's been all of this stuff going on, and I'm kind of interested in the fantasy of the women's revolution, and created a series of photos that are now hanging in the back room here in 1974, and that was the other part of my graduation show. And it did not pass. I did not go, I did not collect $200, and I did not get a degree. And it essentially closed the door on me going into a master's program in fine arts. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I've done that for about 50 years. I have lots of negatives. We moved from Tallahassee to DC, my collective, to New York City. And throughout, I was documenting. And what I was documenting was growing. The gay community was growing. All sorts of things were happening, especially in New York. So my work reflects all of that. But this bit in the back represents a very different kind of work than anything else I did, because if you look at it, it looks like stills from a film, perhaps. Very directive. I trained people in how to hold guns properly, and then took them out in the woods and set up these pictures and took them. It's like there is always someone off frame who's threatening. And that's kind of a piece of it. It was felt like a very threatening time, and people were doing crazy stuff. That was the year. It was 2 months after the SLA had one of their places blown up, burned down, 6 people killed. And it was when Patty Hearst had been kidnapped. So there's just a lot of craziness going on everywhere with armed revolution. So that was kind of a theme around. So I've been doing my own work. I brought some samples of the kind of places I had access to publish and share work, which was always in a women's or a queer community. And just felt quite rejected by the art world, and just worked on my own activism and my own community and documenting it and making that work now available as people are doing more writing and talking about the history of the 70s and the 80s. I'm still sharing work of that. But I retired also. And it's a wonderful thing when you're a photographer and not been able to do your work full time to retire. And the most delightful thing had happened that CPW had taken over this space. I'd been to the place in Woodstock. I lived in Woodstock for a while, that little ramshackle building, and in the storefront here too. But then this space opened, and I started meeting people. I started meeting Kate, and she runs an amazing program across the river called Photo Buddies, which is potluck and open house to all kinds of photographers. Very embracing, warm place. And that's like what I've grown up with. So it was a return to do that. And I have been so welcomed in this community here and able to show images. I do a lot of erotic work, and that was a very important part of my work in the 80s, especially the diversity I wanted to represent around lesbian sexuality, not just vanilla lesbian sexuality, but a wide, diverse body of things. So I haven't really shown those images outside of a lesbian or gay community, but I did here in Crits and on the table, and I was not kicked out. People talked, people understood what was going on, and I thought, oh, I found a new community here where I can actually talk about photography and my work and the politics of it, you know, the mental state of it for me as a queer person in the world. And it's been home. And I really, really thank CPW for all of the support that they do to such a diverse group of photographers and creative people in the Hudson Valley. So I celebrate that we're talking about this, because it will feed more.
Yeah.
And we've got to have more and more and more. And if you guys are around Kingston much, you know there's a lot happening here. So
Thank you, Morgan. I mean, there's so much to pick up on, and there's so many interesting things happening in all of four of your work. One thing that I want to pull out is this sense of community and the different communities you each work with, the communities you're part of. And I think in all of your work, it's very much from the perspective of being within community, right? So not Arbus from the outside looking on, but from the inside and self-representing and perhaps even creating community through the photography, like photo buddies, or through, projects like this one, where actually the process of photo making is part of producing a community and creating. One question that is incredibly important in building those relationships, and especially when you're committing images to film or to screen, is the sense of confidence in each other and trust in those relationships. So I wanted to particularly maybe hear from you, Meryl, about how do you build trusts with these communities and these relationships over the years in your nightlife photos?
Okay, to be specific with the nightlife, well, you're there. And I think if you come from a place of honesty, that you're interested in people and admiring them. I mean, I choose to photograph people expressing joy or full of life, and they're feeling it too. And so I'm photographing something very positive. I'm also someone I'm very polite, and I ask permission, because even now, and I was just at a big event, outdoor space, with me and probably 2,000 men, and there's someone who wrote me privately afterwards, and he said, if you took my picture, please don't post it. I said, well, I don't think I did, but you probably would know it because I would have asked you. Or you would have seen the flash, but I actually always ask. Or I respect people's privacy. And so that's how I think I do. And I know I was going to school saying, you give the pictures back to people. It's like, I'm not that good girl. My family hasn't even seen pictures. I'm not that good that way. But when I do scan it, I'll share it. I'll ask if I know their names, would they like to title it? And to me, one of the most beautiful things of having this opportunity to discover my work and show it, that when people find it, or it's themselves or someone they know, everyone's reaction has been 100% positive. So I'm very pleased about that.
Yeah.
So I think if you be yourself and be honest, you build trust.
It makes me, I'm going off script now, but it reminds me of conversations you and I have had, Morgan, about your work, especially early work and especially erotic work and working with the kink communities in the city, about consent for the photography and sharing images or choosing not to share images. I'm wondering if you can speak a bit about what your process was then and how that has changed over the last 30, 40 years, especially with digital images and the internet. So when you were taking these photographs in the early 80s and working with models and people out in the scene, this person who got in touch with you asking you not to share because they didn't want to be out publicly in that way. This is something that comes up in conversations about queer images, right?
I'd just start out saying that I've never worked with models in my erotic work. They've always been friends, lovers, people who knew my work and wanted to pose. So there is the same thing that Meryl's talking about, a real responsibility around confidentiality and permission from people. And my way of working is, they've seen some of my work. We talk about what they're comfortable with. A lot of my erotic images do not have faces in them. They don't have heads in them. And I have been, criticized for that. But in those years, that was necessary for some of these people to feel safe. And I also realized that not having a face on them sometimes makes it easier for the viewer to enter into the image and experience it in a different way than if there's a face attached to it, whatever's happening. And I would get release forms from people, and I would talk them through stuff. And it would basically, it's like, well, you're just going to put this in lesbian magazines. No one's ever going to see it. My family won't ever see it. And I'm like, look, you got to think about, maybe in 10 years, you're going to have kids. You might be on the PTA. You might be running for a position. And if this photo has gone out and is published, someone can get it. It could be the FBI. That was going on then. It could be anyone who wants to give you a hard time who's discovered this. So think about that. And they're like, oh, maybe I don't want my picture in
And
it.
this was before Google image search and facial technology surveillance.
Yes. But it was a time when people took their photography to be developed at the drugstore or someplace that they often intercepted things. And some photographers were dragged into court for pornography from their work going through that route. So it was very important that I developed the film and I made the prints. No one commercially touched anything. I was responsible for that. And the other thing that I felt was important was for the people I photographed to see the contact sheets. So we'd sit down after the shoot and go over the contact sheets. And if they said, don't ever print this one or that one, we'd just X them out. And they had agency about the actual prints, the actual images that were made, not just they would let me photograph them, but they got to see the results and have input on that. Now, what you're talking about with the digital, I've been in a very weird, hard place. I have releases from people, but I don't trust that the release they gave me 40 years ago applies to the same world we're in now. And I do know some people I photographed have changed immensely in their place in the world and how they're perceived in the world from when I took those pictures. And even though many of them have been published, I don't want to pull new ones or republish without talking to them again. So it's taking me a long time to work through my old images and track down people and get more permission. Some people are dead. I'm not worried about them in that way, but it's such a different world now that I just don't feel that I have releases that are forever and throughout the universe in whatever medium possibly could happen. But I really think that where we are now for people who are my age requires another opportunity to think through.
I love that you take that responsibility so seriously.
I don't want my images to hurt anyone.
Yeah.
They're celebrations of who we are and what we do. And if the person I got to do that with is a model type in the image, I don't want to pull that away from them at this point.
Kate, I was watching you nod your head a little bit there, and I'm wondering if how you navigate this in your work, if there's a generational difference that you're recognizing, or what's your experience?
I think that Morgan is on the cutting edge, and Morgan has been on the cutting edge for a really, really, really long time. Like Morgan's approach is as ethical an approach as exists in the contemporary discourse, and she's been doing it for a really long time. So I look to people, and this is part of why I put so much energy into building intergenerational community spaces, because I cannot show up here and pretend that I am reinventing the wheel, right? I learn from mentors like Morgan and Meryl and other elders who have been out here making this work with our communities for a really long time, and look to them for how to do that in a way that's ethical. So for me to be able to come to CPW and meet and be in relationship and creative dialogue and just friendship with folks who have been thinking critically about these very challenging questions that are connected to the power dynamics intrinsic to the photographic medium is really important to me.
And I think, especially when, for not all queer photography deals with erotica necessarily, but it can, and it has, and it, could and should. So when we're dealing with images that are particularly sensitive or personal, but they're being taken with a view to somewhere, somehow being shared, and other people will see these images. I feel like it brings us to this question that, Luis, you raised when your introduction about desire and about bodies and capturing that in your work. Your construction site images, they are really charged with this desire. And I'd love to hear you talk about, how one goes around with photography conveying that or participating in it, and it doesn't necessarily need to always be erotic. Other embodied experiences, like a heaving dance floor where everyone is sweating together to the beat. But these very specific queer embodied experiences.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think for me, kind of what makes an image erotic and exciting, I think it has to do with like my own lived experience, but then it's also how do you translate that through materiality? I think for me, there's like an eroticness to kind of raw material, to a plastic, through like a tight fitting shirt, through and like looking at a neck. I think there's so much beauty with nudity, but I think it's also the depriving the nudity sometimes kind of like leaves you wanting more, and can sometimes be like even more erotic being deprived, and like alluding to it. I think also what like really informed like this work was I was really looking at Alvin Baltrup's Pier series.
Yes.
And there's something so beautiful and angelic and erotic to like some of his really wide landscapes in the piers, where like the bodies are like these tiny little figures, and just the viewer uses implicates and uses their mind to kind of fill in the blanks, fill in like what these people are doing and how they're communicating. And I think that's how I approach these construction sites, where they're like these really masculine, historically just like very masculine spaces, but it's like, how do I complicate the legibility by putting an image of the construction site next to a tarp that like looks like a belly, or a sheet pressed against a wet skin. Like, how do you create this relationship that kind of complicate the legibility of both of the images?
Can you just take a second and talk about this image with us? Because this was one that really struck me. Was this on a construction site, or is this a separate?
Well, this was like by a train station in Westchester in New York. And there was something to the hemming that was the hemming of the fence, kind of like the different threads trying to pull this fence together, kind of pushing, and the pushing and pulling of something that's been teared apart and something still trying to keep it together. There's also something to the background kind of being like this suburban space. I think a lot about the suburbs, especially these construction sites, are taking along right outside New York City, within Westchester and Fairfield County in Connecticut, where I think a lot about the suburbs and who the suburbs were created for, and kind of the heteronormativity that exists within these spaces, and how does like reclaiming the suburbs look like, and how do these like how can I like eroticize just like these everyday sites and kind of like implicate kind of my own gaze. Yeah.
All right, well, thinking about suburbs as a slightly in-between space, let's get back to where we are in the Hudson Valley. And people often associate queer culture with urban spaces, and there's, a deep history there for us. But I'm curious, and Kate, you brought this up about having access to space being a kind of a privilege, and can you talk to a little bit about what creating work and creating community in the Hudson Valley has meant for you, or how maybe it's impacted your practice?
Yeah, I'm really interested in rural queer ecologies, what it means to think about place through a lens of ecology, and the fact that each of us exist within these systems that are very much alive and that we co-create together, right? Like Morgan's lived here for 20 years. I've lived here for 2. I lived here 15 years ago, but it's very different, right? And so for me to come and be an active participant in contributing to building and nurturing pre-existing ecosystems comes with, like, first and foremost recognition of what's come before. I am really inspired by the work, by Morgan's work and Meryl's work, and their generation of lesbian photographers specifically, and what the cost at which it came to witness and to document and to build queer archives. My work is concerned with building alternative queer archives, and whose histories get to be documented, whose histories get to be institutionalized, and for whom is it safe to be a part of the historical record, right? And Morgan alluded to this now, and certainly we're seeing this right now in terms of how our trans brothers and sisters are being targeted systemically by the administration. These questions of safety, consent, and consideration within a historic record are fraught. And safety has to be at the front of that conversation. And so when we think about a place like the Hudson Valley with a rich queer history, a rich artistic tradition, and both of those things being rooted in a sense of rurality, right? Like, I didn't move to the Hudson Valley because it's New York City light. Right? I moved to the Hudson Valley because it itself is a very rich destination for unique cultural generation that comes out of the rural quality, where you go to the function and you see lots of people that you know. And in a place like this, you're not just going to the club, although I'm going to the club too. But we're going to Dairy Drag, which is a drag show series at a lesbian-owned farm, Chasen Farm, that do an amazing job building community. You're going to Queer Soup Night, that is a very mutual aid focused series where people are feeding and nourishing one another to raise money to directly meet and address the acute needs of the queer community. And so as an artist, engaging in, first and foremost, the act of showing up, right? To be an active member of a community means to show up with consistency and ask for nothing, to wear the outfit on the dance floor and dance with the people before you photograph them, to go to the soup night and be like, hey, do you need a hand cleaning up? And so as a queer person, really thinking about what it means to engage in addressing the needs of the community, making artwork is evidence of the primary goal, which is to be present with people.
Thank you. It's so much to think about. And what's interesting is you mentioning that you are interested in queer archives and history and kind of memory. And so that's like a topic, an intentional kind of approach or topic in your practice and the way you live your life. Whereas Meryl, you mentioned in your introduction that after several years, it occurred to you, or it was suggested to you, this work you've been doing for so many years constitutes this incredibly important archive, and that you have, been documenting people's lives and our culture and our community in a way that is, it's affirming, it is placing us within history. I mean, it's life-giving. I truly believe that queer representation is life-giving. So it feels like coming from different ends of this relationship to LGBTQ cultural history, and how photography plays such an important role in how we define ourselves, how we support each other, how we see ourselves represented. Can you speak a little bit about the experience photographing in the clubs then, and then going back today with a different perspective on it all?
Excellent question. When you sent us an email to think about, were you consciously making an archive? The only time I consciously thought I was that my purpose was making an archive was in 78 and 79. I was a CETA artist, Comprehensive Employment Training Act. And at the time, I was hired to make a photo archive of Jewish New York for the American Jewish Congress. At the same time, I was going out at night, and I was going to Fire Island. I was living my life. So my mindset that I'm creating an archive absolutely influenced how I photographed my life. Though I wasn't thinking anyone was doing, I wasn't even thinking about showing it to anybody, or anybody would ever see it. And so it's all in retrospect for me that I have this delight to know that I've made work that's relevant today, that's a unique vision, and culturally and historically important. A similar life experience of mine was that for 14 of my teaching years, I was a teacher in Bushwick, Brooklyn, when it was wasn't hot, it was burnt out. And I took photographs going to and from work all that time. Who knew that I would end up making the most extensive known documentation of Bushwick in a changing time? And yet, if you asked me then, even if you asked me 10 years ago, did I think Bushwick would be becoming a center for queer culture and nightlife? It's like, no way. That got me back into the nightlife because of the Bushwick, and the club scenes were coming together. So you don't know.
I'm conscious of time because I do want to hear from questions from the audience. And I think the sense of consciously recording is something I know, Morgan, I've witnessed you do it many times, pulling out the camera, knowing that this needs to be recorded. We need to document this. And I know your work at the Lesbian Her Story Archives has probably informed some of that commitment to documenting our culture. Do you want to just speak to that briefly? Because I think that's worth bringing out in your practice, is that.
The remnants of my collective, Dorothy Allison and I, moved from DC to New York in '79. And the people we met in New York who were referred to us from friends in DC who could give us a sense of where to find the bulletin boards that had the best listings for apartments, because that's how you found apartments. Were these two women who lived in the Upper West Side, so we went and met them, and it was Joan and Deb, Joan Nessel, Deb Adel, who were two of the founders of the Lesbian History Archives. And they had this little project going on in the back room. A couple shelves, some books, a few things. They'd started an archives of lesbian material, and that made so much sense to me. And I like them, and they were just wonderful people. And so I just started volunteering there and would go there every Thursday night. And we were doing newsletters, we were doing mailings where you had to sort the mail and put it in mail bags and drag it to the post office. We published our own newsletters and stuff. It was all community building and outreach and collecting and saving materials. We had slideshows we did all the time. So it was a wonderful place for someone like me to be, because it was about building community. It did have a photo element to it, and it had people coming and going and sharing and bringing more things. It was just, and it still is. That's the amazing thing. 50 years later, the Lesbian History Archives, which is an all volunteer-run organization still, we don't hire anyone. We have interns, we have volunteers, we have students coming in, we have visitors all the time. We're totally volunteer-run. And there's a group of coordinators that are the people who've been doing the work for the longest and are committed to it and are willing to sit through meetings. And our meetings are all run with the dreaded word consensus, which means they last forever. And we go over and over and over things. But that's what keeps us honest and on top of things. And I'm very pleased with the condition of the archives now, because we are just crawling with young people and all sorts of diversity and ways of saying who they are and what they are and how they are. And it's just fabulous.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's so encouraging, and to know that there is this, real, not just interest, but kind of thirst in younger generations to connect
Yes.
and to learn and to be part of this ongoing history, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I will add, in my work in being in queer community, there's so many people who don't necessarily have a sense of queer history and a sense of connection to ancestors, whether that's the facts of what happened, the activist movements, sacrifices that were made, the realities of being a queer person, a lesbian, a trans person in the generations before our generation. And access to archives shows us how to be. Access to archives and photography in particular shows us what's possible, right? And so many people just wouldn't come out if they weren't able to look at people like their work and be able to orient themselves within that legacy to see, oh, it is safe. Oh, there are people like me. Oh, I'm not alone. And it is a radical act of resistance to create and foster these archives over a long period of time to make the younger generations feel more free.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to wrap it up so that we can turn over to you all. But my last question to you all, and if you wouldn't mind each answering, is, we've talked a bit about audience and sharing work and the impact your work has. And I was wondering if you could leave us with a sense of, what conversations do you hope that your work, your personal work, what conversations do you want them to start? What do you want people, when they see your photographs in these exhibitions, what do you want them to carry with them once they've seen your work?
I hope that someone feels an excitement for this gift of life, that we're in this present time right now. And as bad as maybe things are, there's so much beauty and so much love and so much community and joy. And photography is an amazing, amazing art medium.
Thank you so much for that. I would second the importance of joy as an act of resistance, especially in moments as acute as the one that we find ourselves in today. And my work focuses on like what it is to use the body to perform identity and to engage critically with the medium of photography to see oneself. And so if someone stands in front of my work and they feel a spark of recognition, or they feel that they can then go out in the world and express themselves more freely, then I have succeeded.
That's beautiful. No, those are both really great. I think for myself, I think I want people to know that there's power in imagination, and the imagination is a productive space to understand yourself. I think also knowing that the world, that we are there's far more of us out in the world, and you just don't know who you're coming across that you are in conversation with, that you are desired, that you are part of a larger community.
These are all wonderful. One thing that I'm very concerned about is that we keep growing as a community, and I've been in this community for a long time and seen a lot of changes and things happening, and it's been a hard struggle for some people to embrace some of the changes that have come down in the last 10 or 15 years. Kate and I have talked about this, and it breaks my heart that some of our community has kind of been left in the dust about understanding different realities of queer people now, especially trans people, and how that is part of us and how we are all in that community together, because that was not happening so much in the 80s and the 70s. And it's growing in a new and wonderful thing. But I think that's something I'm very concerned about, is that we all are connecting and listening and talking to each other, having conversations like this in such a way that we expand who our community is and make it safe for a whole array of people that we may not have started, especially older people, considering at some point. And I think we're very committed to making that happen. That's one thing I'm concerned about. The thing for me personally with my work is I've always hoped that almost any lesbian looking at the wide variety of my erotic work will find one image in there that they go, ooh, that.
I think that's a very worthwhile goal to have in your practice, and we thank you for it, Morgan. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah, I think. If anyone has any questions, we would love to hear your questions, because we're recording this panel. It'd be great if they could be asked through a microphone, right? So I hand this to you.
If anyone has any questions, you can come up here and speak it into the mic, or speak loud from your seat if you prefer. Yeah. I know it sometimes takes a second to readjust to now you being the focus.
I'm not shy. Hi. First of all, beautiful, speechless. I really appreciate the four of you taking the time. I'm particularly interested in sort of the transitional space, especially because all four of you come from different locations across the country, right? I know myself, I'm from Central Massachusetts, but I've been here almost 5 years now. Love it, don't plan to leave. And it's really informed my own artistic practice in a very interesting and exciting and unexpected way. So I kind of had this question for all four of you, especially in terms of coming from all different walks of life, locations, but all sort of meeting up here in Hudson Valley specifically, how that transition itself sort of informed your work? What were those moments where like, oh, something, now that I'm in like Poughkeepsie, Woodstock, Kingston, how did that in particular, that moment, inform your work in any different way that it did?
I realized recently, actually, that when I moved up here, I kind of stopped making work because I lost my community in the city. And I did not find community up here for the first 10 or 15 years. The last 5 or 10 years, it's been booming up here. And I was kind of oblivious to that in a way because I was just working away in the library at New Paltz. And I got a new camera, and I haven't had time to get to know it very well because I've been working on these other things, but I'm going to start making new work, and I'm very excited about that. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be some of what I've done, and I hope it's going to be some of the stuff that I set aside long ago to focus exclusively on my community. I'd like to return to some art photography, as we call it, versus the more documentary stuff. But it's an exciting time for me. I'm very happy to be in this place with it where I can explore this. But I'm not there yet. It's a new journey for me.
Well, three of us actually are part of the Women's Photography Collective, and we have a show there. And for my about care and resilience, for that, I specifically photographed the Unicorn Bar here in Kingston because it's the only LGBTQ defined space. The queerly community who do the Woodstock Pride events, they're amazing. They're amazing. Amazing. And it's so nice to participate in their events. I'll talk about it. I'm planning to do a new self-portrait. It's all ready to go. In 1974, I made a self-portrait. It's probably the queerest self-portrait I could imaginable. It's me dressed in my Girl Scout uniform with my Girl Scout handbook and my braids and my hat and my sash and sitting in my parents' rumpus room with my hand gently placed between my legs and doing their Girl Scout oath. I've got the uniform already. I've got the tie, even my braids, and they're hanging. And Patty knows, I said, I want to take a new self-portrait with the Girl Scout oath outside in front of our woodshed. So that's something I'm directly planning that has to do with the current my environment. The dress doesn't fit quite the same. I'm scared to
As somebody who grew up in a rural place and comes from farm folks, I come from a family that has roots in Appalachia, and so queerness is not visible often in records of those spaces. And so for me to claim my queerness in adulthood, I'm somebody who didn't come out until later in life. For me to claim my queerness also means to square that queerness with those pieces of origin, right? With the farm legacy, with religion and Catholicism specifically. And so moving to the Hudson Valley, which is a place where rurality and queerness have been in dialogue together for a really long time, makes me feel more free to make work using those tools. And so to use my own body in a 100-year-old farmhouse that has a rich history and archive of its own in this land of the most beautiful light, that is so cinematic and elevates really anything that you place within it in the frame, makes me feel able to bring together these disparate parts of my identity and show up as all of who I am. And I feel very grateful to this place and the communities within it for that opportunity.
I think for me is there's a large familial and communal history that's happened within Westchester, and I'm just really curious about these histories, but even more like these queer histories that just like have been erased or like that had been unspoken. But like I recently found out that like one of like the most influential person that facilitated migration of Mexicans into Westchester was a closeted gay man that passed away, and he never really got to live his life. And that just was just like, it like gave me like a new, like responsibility is like a heavy word, but along the lines of wanting to speak of like these histories within this region.
Just, responsibility is a heavy word, but the shared responsibility that, I feel and that I think many of us feel to each other in community, the affinity that we share, it's about care, right? Not just about care, looking after, but like when you said that, we all winced, we all felt it. Like we care about that. We care about him and that story. And that's our shared responsibility to, to care about those people, to care about each other, right? Any other questions?
I have to just interject just a couple things. There is another queer place in Kingston. It's the Gay Center.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not forget that. And there's a new group, newish group in New Paltz Pride. And the big gay Hudson Valley. I mean, there are lots of things going on. And if anyone here is looking for resources, they're there. Just ask us or other people. But yeah.
Absolutely.
Hi. It's been so interesting to hear all of your perspectives on the Hudson Valley as someone who's lived mostly Orange County, also Ulster County, their whole life. So my question is, whoever wants to answer, how do you deal with not feeling inspired by your environment when you know you can't just get up and leave for some time?
Would you mind repeating?
Like, living here, I just feel as an artist uninspired because I've been here all my life. So how do you like handle and where do you find inspiration when you know you can't like leave permanently for a while?
Stir the pot. Stir the pot, right? Like I'm somebody who was raised in Vermont and is very familiar with that space, and I am now spending a lot of time there for the first time in adulthood, and my relationship to it now is totally different. And so I'd imagine for someone like you who's from this place, you not only get to, but are kind of like, this is your place, and if it is now lacking vim and verve for you, you can check in with yourself and see what needs are not being met. What parts of your cup are not being filled, how you can become more resourced and surround yourself with people and experiences that make you go, whoa, and maybe feel a little scared and maybe feel a little outside your comfort zone. And just from my own experience of moving around a lot over the last number of years and trying to build community as quickly as I can when I get to a new place, as Morgan rightly named, like volunteering with pre-existing efforts goes a really, really long way. And so finding a need that sparks your interest, whether it's housing or food justice or archive development or athletics or whatever your other side special interest is, can be, I think, a good way to reinvigorate and transform your sense of your relationship to the place.
And you got yourself here today.
And no matter what your art form is or expression, not doing it is as important as doing it. That taking the time off, looking, smelling, feeling, tasting, it'll come out. It will.
Mm-hmm.
And join a club.
Oh, I'm stretching this really far, but I just wanted to acknowledge that what you brought up is really important as well. You know, that we are kind of celebrating the Hudson Valley in all these different ways and all the positive aspects for queer community in the Hudson Valley. But of course, for many people, a rural experience may not feel that way to them. It might feel actually oppressive or trapped, or it might be really hard to find community for many people, right? And that can happen in cities, but I think particularly in more isolated spaces as well. So seconding Morgan's comment that, you know, great that you're here today. Thank you for coming.
Brian.
Hi, thank you all for coming today and speaking. But I really have a fundamental question, which is how all of you are responding in your lives and in your representations to the current legal and political conditions that we're living under now, particularly in their anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-immigrant rhetoric and imagery.
That's such an important question. I think I would also add AI, the rise of AI, to the conversation. I think the short answer is to just continue making work. I think something that I've noticed within like the past 2 years is just like, and part of the reason why a show like this and why conversations like this are important is because there have also been a decrease in support in certain aspects. So I think like showing up and showing up for one another and showing up for our friends is really vital and important. And I think it's sometimes visibility sometimes can be dangerous, but not making it can contribute to erasure. So even if it's not the time to put the work out, it's not an excuse to like not make the work.
Morgan and I talk about this a lot. And what we come to, and what she offers to me as a younger person from a different generation, is that there are periods in time where our community had to have very robust underground networks of support, the old networks of accessing things like housing and healthcare and food and the basic things that allow for the dignity of people to be recognized. And so those old systems are still very much exist, but we, over the last 10 or 15 years, we were able to not have to rely on them so deeply, and we are at a time where we need them more now. And so as an artist who first and foremost like is interested in making sure that my community's needs are met, that means okay, I have one spare bedroom in my farmhouse, and so that is not only an artist residency room, but it's also emergency housing for trans people now, and because there is a huge influx of trans folks moving to this region and Vermont and other parts of the Northeast from places like Kansas and Idaho that are directly legislating against trans folks' civil rights. And so I have access to one room. That's a small drop in the bucket, but it does make a little difference in my corner of the world and in the corner of the world for the people who have access to that. Gathering people together at the salon that I host every month and feeding people, like physically nourishing folks, letting them know that they belong. And I work as a journalist as well, and so I'm working on a number of stories right now about the impact of the current administration's legislation against transgender military members. and I have recently spent time at West Point reporting on what is going on very much behind closed doors intentionally. The military is forcing separation for 4,500 transgender service members who have long and illustrious careers, and trying to make the argument that their identity as transgender people impacts their what they call readiness for deployment. And I've been in the room very recently where these people's human rights have been violated, where their constitutional rights have been violated. And I was there with a camera. And it is not easy to witness, and it is not always safe, as you named, to publish. But to be in the room, and I'm going down to DC to continue this work, and I won't be photographing when I go to DC, as Gordon Herrero, who sued the Trump administration the day after the executive order was passed, mandating that transgender people be expelled from the military, he's the lead plaintiff. And so he is going to be in DC next week and advocating for a class action lawsuit, which will extend protections to transgender people across the military while this works its way through the courts. And I will be there as a community member. I will not be there as a journalist, because to show up and to witness and to stand in solidarity when it can come at cost is important, because I have privilege to trade. Transgender people don't get to choose how often they show up or don't show up. You know, these guys have been in this fight for a really long time. And so as someone who, like in my small corner, has a small amount of ability to offer solidarity, I try and do that whenever I possibly can.
What she said. Totally. I think those of us who can be visible need to be as visible as we can be in as many places as we can be. And we do need to be aware that not everyone has the same capacity or privilege or experience or guts to be walking around with a target on your back. I know I have a target on my back and it's just going to be there, and that's what it is. But I also am not caring for children in my life. I mean, it's different for everybody. But what you're doing is courageous and wonderful. And that's what we all need to figure out, is what is the part we have in this current situation that we can do to make safety nets, to make people have some place to grab onto when they need it, to find resources for people, housing for a week or two, whatever. Because everyone in here has the capacity to do that, whether or not you're a photographer or whatever. If you are a good-minded person and have a big heart, do stuff. Don't just be passive, because it is a scary, scary time.
The answer to oppression is to be louder and prouder, and show up and make what you do more visible, and of course vote, and no one could do everything, but everyone can do something. And if you can find a group that you write postcards with or make phone calls with, you can do something and be yourself.
Thank you so much, the four of you. This has been such a pleasure and an honor, and what a treat, a way to end our week. Thank you all for participating as well. Thank you, CPW, you guys rock. And yeah, let's just take some of that spirit with us into our lives and into our weekend. So happy Pride, everyone. Happy Pride.
I'll just echo that. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Anna, thank you all the panelists. We have about 30 more minutes that the galleries are open. So if you want to check out some of the work that you saw on rotation, we'll be here tomorrow with an artist walkthrough as well as a catalog launch. So come back again if you want. Thank you all.